Analytics Tableau user group, May edition. I think you are from all over the world. I'm really glad. We are all glad to have you here. And what makes this TUG a bit different? This user group is totally dedicated to analytics in Tableau. It takes place virtually almost every month, and this user group is the place to be to come together and learn all about the analytics functions across the Tableau platform. It's going to be all analytics all the time, and we'll be joined by Tableau team as well as so many amazing speakers who are going to share all the learning with you. Make sure you subscribe here to the user group if you haven't. You can I'll just pause for a second so that you can scan the QR code if you haven't yet joined, but most probably if you're here, you have. Okay, so introduction to our global TUG leaders. First, we have Annabelle Rincon. She is enjoying life at the moment. Then we have me, Prasan Prem. I'm a senior BI engineer at Emirates NBD. And we have Chimri Nosu, who is a database manager at Post Media Network. Annabelle, she's a Tableau visionary, ambassador. These are a few things to talk about her. She's a really passionate person who's going all around and helping you with all this amazing content. She's a visual analytics and enablement lead, and her passions are absolutely Tableau and her dog and chocolate as well. She's from Zurich, and she also co-leads Data Plus Women Zurich, which I would like you to join right here by scanning this QR code if you haven't. You can also check her blog where she puts up great content. She also builds great visualizations. You will find so many tutorials over there. And you can also connect her right using her Twitter handle. Okay, hope you have scanned the QR code. Just pause. Then we have me. I'm Prasan Prem. I'm a Tableau visionary and ambassador. I fell in love with Tableau and DataFam and actually learned the way of giving back from so many professionals around the world. And later, I also founded programs known as Tableau Buddy and VizDiner. I started my Tableau journey in 2020, and I'm currently working as senior AI engineer. And I love being around the community and mentoring people. And apart from that, I love my cats, food, and anime. This is just a hype word. I used three things I can die for. I won't die, but I love all these things and absolutely my family. Then we have Chimli Nawasu. He's a Tableau visionary and ambassador. If you know him, you know his work. It's absolutely amazing. He's a data viz manager, as well as he does freelance via VizSite Analytics. He started using Tableau in 2020 and has been in love since. We all know that. He loves and he believes in harnessing data and design so that they can come together and he can give something that is not just appealing but also insightful. As an artist, he enjoys experimenting with different visualization styles and designs, and he constantly needs his data viz fix and sometimes gets withdrawal if he hasn't vizzed for a while. So that's all about our TUG leaders. And now some of the ground rules. So you can interact amongst you using the chat section. Please ask your questions in the Q&A because then it will be helpful for all of us to answer them, also for the speakers. And one rule, enjoy because the session is being recorded and will be also available on the YouTube channel. And we will be sending you an email afterwards. And don't hesitate to follow us on Twitter and also use the hashtag analytics_tug. Okay, time for the agenda that you are here for. So this was the welcome by us. Then we have an amazing session, Don't Scare Users Away, Learn to Assess Your Dashboard's Usability by Silvia, followed by Animation, Interactivity, and Ridiculous Ideas by Pulley. And then we have Using Tableau to Help Homeless Animals by Samantha Hill and Tom. And then we will wrap it up with all of your questions. So please be helpful and ask away as many questions as you can. Okay, so I hope you are all ready now. Time to bring our amazing speakers on the stage. And first we have Silvia. You can follow her on Twitter using the handle Silvia_rocks. Silvia is an Italian data visualization consultant with the company Information Lab in France. She helps clients improve their skills in data visualization and Tableau with a particular focus on UX and UI design. And fun fact about her that with background experience in journalism and in digital communication in the non-profit sector, she likes to blend analysis and creativity in her data visualization projects in static as well as in dynamic formats. So I'll hand over to Sylvia to take us through the amazing presentation, Don't Scare Users Away, Learn to Assess Dashboards Usability.
Hi, thank you very much,
Stop
Prasad.
sharing. Thank you for having you. Stop sharing. Okay, now we are fine.
Okay, great. I'll share my screen. Just tell me if you can see it. I only have one screen, so if there is anything wrong, please tell me. Don't write. Okay. Here we go. You should see. I'm sorry. You should see my face on the screen, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So, well, as Prasad said, I am a data visualization UX consultant with the company The Information Lab in France. And today I'll talk about a methodology to assess your dashboard usability in order to avoid scaring your users away. So first of all, what is usability? It is a measure of how easy an interface is to use for its intended target users. And we can also define usability compared to utility. Utility is whether the system provides the features that you need, whereas usability is how easy and pleasant these features are to use. Providing only functionality is not enough, because if the interface is very unpleasant, complicated to use, your users will do their best to avoid using it, and you will have worked for nothing. So the product should be useful, combining utility and usability. So today I will talk about the methodology to evaluate the usability of an interface, and specifically I will try to show you how we can apply this to dashboards. This methodology is called Heuristic Evaluation, and it was conceived by Jakob Nielsen in 1989. It involves inspecting the interface based on a set of 10 usability principles. These principles are called heuristic. Heuristic means a rule of thumb. These are very broad design guidelines that could be applied to a wide range of interfaces. And it's a rough check on usability to find the basic usability flows. In practice, when you are creating a dashboard, at some point you will have a prototype. So it's a very good idea to test it with real users. So user testing means putting your users in front of the product and observing them while they use it. So you can spot any pain points, any point of improvement in the design. But even before user testing, you can perform heuristic evaluation in order to clean up the interface from the basic usability flows and avoid wasting your test users' time on usability principles that are already quite known. You can also apply, of course, heuristic evaluation in between rounds of tests. So basically, just having this in mind, that heuristic evaluation is a rough check. With user testing, instead, you go deeper into the specifics of your product, okay? But let me show you this cartoon from the Scottish cartoonist Tom Gold, in which we see this engineer who has created the robot, and now he is testing it with a real user, the woman up there. And only when he tests it, he realizes that he forgot to add an off button. Had he done heuristic evaluation before user testing, probably he would have added that off button already. Okay, and now I present to you Jakob Nielsen, the person who conceived the heuristic evaluation, and we'll go through the 10 principles during the presentation. And also I will mention some ideas from the work of another UX expert, Don Norman. Throughout the presentation, I will use this mock-up of dashboards in which I intentionally put some features to illustrate some examples. Just let me be precise and say that this is not the ideal dashboard in terms of usability. There is no such thing anyway. It's just something that it's useful to have throughout the presentation. So let's go to the first principle here. I would like to highlight these buttons to the left, last month, and the products here. Here we have last month and last week, and last month is in purple, meaning that the figures that we're looking at right now are about last month. And the same thing goes for the products. And we can imagine as soon as we click on the product button, the button turns purple and it gets a tick mark. So this is a good example for the first principle, the visibility of system status. Let's take an example from real life to explain it. You are waiting for the elevator, you just press the button. At that point, you are expecting some kind of feedback from the physical interface, the elevator. You're expecting the button to light up, maybe seeing the number of the floor at which the elevator is right now. So you can decide if you want to wait or not. You're expecting feedback. You want to know what is the status of the interface right now. Where is the elevator right now, for example? Another example, you just found your dream job and you're uploading your resume on a company's website. There again, you are expecting a feedback. For example, a message saying submitting or submission successful. In all these cases, you want something that says your action of clicking, of pushing the button has gone through. You're expecting a feedback from the interface. And the same thing goes for a dashboard, right? Here we have the purple color is very useful to let us know that the pushing the button has worked. And the principle, as it was written by Jakob Nielsen, says the design should always keep users informed about what is going on through appropriate feedback within a reasonable amount of time. Of course, not the day after. Well, next one. Here I would like to show you this filter to the right. And maybe you've noticed that all the other filters, filter 1 and 2, are in the filter panel to the left, whereas this one is here. Why is that? Because this one applies only to this bar chart, whereas the other ones apply to the whole dashboard. It's positioned next to the bar chart it activates. And this is an example for the second principle, match between the system and the real world. Okay, here again, an example from outside the world of dashboards. Maybe you watched this short video by Pixar. It's called Lifted. And it's the story of this little cute alien. He has to pass an abduction exam. So he has to demonstrate that he can abduct a human being from his bed while he's asleep. And he has to do all of that from the spaceship by pushing these huge push button panels. But the problem is that all the buttons in this panel look the same. They give no hint about their function. We have no way of knowing if one button will have the effect of lifting the body of the person up or bringing it down, or he doesn't know. So he ends up failing his exam. But I have to say, it's not his fault. It's actually a usability problem. I am sure that the little alien will have appreciated best something like this. So these are the arrow buttons on a computer keyboard, and as you may notice, they are arranged in a logical order. The one that goes up is on top, the one that goes to the right is to the right, and so on. This is what Don Norman calls natural mapping, okay? In the same way, in a dashboard, we should give, by the position of things, we should give hints to end users about how the dashboard works. So for example, we position this filter next to the only bar chart that is activated by the filter. And the principle says the design should follow real-world conventions, making information appear in a natural and logical order, should speak the user's language, use words, phrases, and concepts familiar to the user, rather than internal jargon. So there is also a component, a language component. We could take other examples about that. Next one, here, yeah, we have this clear all filters button, and that's an example for the heuristic user control and freedom. So again, an example from real life. Imagine you've just you have a question for a colleague, so you call her and you start the conversation by politely saying, "How are you?" You would expect your colleague to just answer, "Fine," and then you go on with your question. But what if your colleague starts to talking about her lives and her problems at work, at home, and so on, and blah, 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 a lot of things you actually don't care about. You only wanted to ask your question, right? So at that point, you may want an exit from that conversation. But the problem is that you cannot undo that question. How are you? Okay? So the same thing goes for dashboard. In dashboards in particular, people are there to explore the product. Dashboards are by nature explorative, exploratory visualizations. So people go there and filter and then highlight stuff. Maybe they want to start another type of analysis. So in this case, the clear all filters button is very useful. Also, in every interface, users may perform actions by mistake. So in that case too, a button to reset things is very useful. And that's the principle of user control and freedom. Users often perform actions by mistake. In the case of dashboard, I would also say by exploration. They need a clearly marked emergency exit to leave the unwanted action without having to go through an extended process. So some examples may be the cancel button, back to home page, close window, clear all filters, and you name it. Okay, here I would like to call your attention on this navigation bar on the top. We have 4 tabs, and right now in the screenshot, we are watching the tab website 1. How do we know that? Because it's written in bold and it's underlined. And this kind of highlighting of the tab we are looking at is something that we have already seen elsewhere on other dashboards, on other websites. And that's why we understand that pretty quickly without needing any explanations, because it's standards, it's a convention. Which brings me to the next principle, consistency and standards. First of all, consistency. There are actually 2 types of consistency. The first one is internal consistency, and that's at the product level. It's the fact that UI components in your interface are consistent. For example, if the buttons in your dashboard all look different, that's puzzling for the end users, right? But there is also the external consistency, and that's the consistency between your product and other similar products in the market. If all other products use some kind of standards of conventions, it's in your interest to use the same standards in order to have an interface that is predictable and easy to learn and to use. Otherwise, if you break those conventions, you are forcing your users to learn something new. Well, this is from a usability point of view, but just let me be precise and say that, of course, sometimes you can break conventions, and that's a good idea. That's how innovation is born. But it's important to be aware of what you're doing. Okay, so that's the Just be aware that of the difference of using convention and not using them. And also today I'm talking specifically about dashboards, but in other type of data visualization, it could be different. Okay, so we should rely on standards, but what is a standard and for who? Let's take an example. Here, as soon as we see this kind of filter, we know that we can select only one option at a time, because radio buttons only allows for that. And that's a convention. That's why we understand it without needing any explanation. On the contrary, we know that checkboxes allow for multiple selections at a time. But sometimes we may have some standards that are less obvious. For example, for the filter panel in dashboards, I've seen that there is no standardized practice, at least as far as I could notice. I've seen this icon used to show or hide the filter panel. And to be true, this icon, the hamburger menu, it originally was used in mobile devices not to hide the filter panel, but to hide the navigation bar. I've also seen this one used kind of variation on the hamburger menu. And then finally, the funnel. All these three options may be good options for the filter panel, but it depends on the audience, okay? For example, the filter panel, it's my impression that it is not very intuitive, or maybe not yet, for people that are not very familiar with interactive dashboards. So rely on standards, on conventions, of course, but also always check for your assumptions about them and make sure you adapt to your audience, because standards are something that is in constant evolution, and something may not be a standard for everybody, or maybe not yet. Okay, the principle says users should not have to wonder whether different words, situations, or actions mean the same thing, follow platform and industry conventions. So your UI should be predictable and learnable for your audience. Next one, here we have this tooltip here, which shows the formula used to calculate the KPI conversion rate. So imagine that in your company, you have two different ways of calculating this KPI. It's actually something that I really saw at some clients. So in this case, having this tooltip is very nice because it prevents you from misunderstanding how that KPI should be read. So this brings me to the idea of error, and I would like to show you two heuristics at the same time, the fifth one and the ninth one, because they both apply to the idea of error. Let's take an example from real life again. Once I was in a restaurant and I was looking for the toilet, and I saw a door down the corridor to the right, which looked exactly like a toilet door. I went there, and then I realized it was not. And on the door, I saw this message saying the toilet is right behind you. This message prevented me from entering a room which was not the toilet, prevented me from making a mistake. Another example from Google, from Gmail, when you send an email in Gmail, you click on send, and then you get this small message in which you have, of course, a feedback from the interface. That's the first principle, but also you have the undo option. That's the possibility of undoing your action, sending the email, in case you realize you've made a mistake. So these examples are to illustrate how we can help users to deal with errors and mistakes. And here again, the tooltip in the case of dashboard prevents users from misunderstanding the KPI and saves users time and avoid frustrations. The principle says good error messages are important, but the best designs carefully prevent problems from occurring in the first place. Of course, sometimes there are errors. In those cases, we should use error messages, and they should be expressed in plain language, precisely indicate the problem, and suggest a solution. Okay, here again we have two heuristics at the price of one. So I'd like to show you the small information icon to the top right of the screen. And we can imagine that we click on that and we have instructions on how to use the interface. And then we also have this purple color on a bar on the maximum value for each bar chart. In this case, there is no instructions. We rely on the on users' ability to understand that this means that is the maximum value only by using this visual hint. So number 6 is implicit instruction, whereas number 10 is explicit instructions. But in both cases, we are putting in place something to guide users through the interface and help them understand how the interface works. So these are the two principles: recognition rather than recall, and that's implicit instructions. We recognize things in the interface without needing to recall instructions, and explicit instruction is help and documentation. So here again, let's take an example from outside the world of dashboards. Maybe you've watched this film. It's The Gremlins. It's a film from the 80s. And it's the story of a boy who has a present from his dad, and the present is this cute fiery creature here, which is called a mogwai. And the mogwai comes with instructions. The instructions say you should not let it come in contact with water, and do not feed it after midnight. So the instructions were very simple, very clear, and yet what happened? Maybe you remember if you watched the film. Well, the boy knows the instructions, but he forgets them, and he feeds the mogwai after midnight, and the mogwai turns into a gremlin. And then there are gremlins everywhere. It's a horror film for teenagers in the 80s. So, well, anyway, what I want to stress here is that the instructions were not useful to prevent the worst to happen, because the boy could not remember them at the right time. So how can we help people remember? Don Norman would say that the most effective way of helping people remember is to make it unnecessary. This means that you should not rely only on instruction sheets in order to make sure that your users understand your dashboard. In fact, I think that there are 3 levels of instructions. The first one is no instructions is needed. The interface is self-explanatory. We should indeed strive to create an interface which is self-explanatory. Use all the UI components to create something that is understandable and intuitive. Of course, sometimes you may want to be cautious and make sure that all different types of users still understand your dashboard. In that case, you may want to drop some instruction in the interface. And I would suggest to drop them in context, which means in subtitles, in tooltips, directly into your users' flow, right where users will need them, right next to the charts that that they apply to, and so on. And third position, there comes the instruction sheet. So I don't want to say that instruction sheets are completely useless. That's not true. Of course, it's a good idea to have an instruction sheet. But the only thing is that you should not rely only on instruction sheet, and they should not be the first solution that comes to mind when you are trying to find a way to guide your users through the interface and let them understand how the interface works. If you rely only on instruction sheets, that's an acknowledgement of failure of your design. So the sixth heuristic says we should minimize the user's memory load by making elements, actions, and options visible. This user should not have to remember information from one part of the interface to another, and the information required to use the design should be visible or easily retrievable when needed. And then, of course, it's best if the system does not need any additional explanation. However, it may be necessary to provide documentation to help users understand how to complete their tasks. That's the instruction sheet, okay? Or instructions in context. But when you put instruction, just make sure that is written in an understandable way. So not like this, for example. This is an example taken from dashboard I saw once. Client, they had this eye icon, and when you hovered over with mouse, you had this message. Let me read it for you because it's great, I think. Click on the label of an item here below or on a section of a bar of the histogram in order to display the detailed view by period and the details of the AI. Asterisk, additional information. I think this is a masterpiece of useless complexity. Okay, so just avoid this kind of convoluted language. Okay, next one. Here, the number 7, it's actually an example taken from Tableau server. So, you know, on Tableau server, you can create custom views, and then you have this button, which is a shortcut to go back quickly to the original view without needing to redo all your filters and stuff. So this is an example of the flexibility and efficiency of use. And the principle says shortcuts may speed up the interaction for the expert user so that the design can cater to both inexperienced and experienced users. Allow users to tailor frequent actions. For example, an expert user on Tableau server may would like to have custom views and then the possibility to quickly shift back to the original view. And here we are to the last principle, aesthetics and minimalist design. Let's read it first. It says that interfaces should not contain information that is irrelevant. Every extra unit of information in an interface competes with the relevant units of information and diminishes their relative visibility. Okay, that's a lot in there, but mainly in this principle, we have two elements, aesthetics and minimalist design. Let's start with minimalist design. I would like to give you my vision about that. In my opinion, I think we should not give to end users a dashboard that looks like this. Of course, it's so cluttered, so many things. But we should not even take away everything, even necessary elements, and end up having something like this, which is just very difficult to use because we don't know what is in there or how to use it. What we should strive to do is first take away all the unnecessary elements, and then once the interface is clean from the visual pollution, then at that point we can put stuff again, but this time in an intentional way. We should intentionally guide our users through the interface, so intentional and organized like a little bandbox. So I would like to rephrase the old mantra, less is more, into less and intentional is more. Also, I should add that the heuristic evaluation methodology was conceived in 1809, and at that time the internet was full of crowded web pages with a lot of visual noise and sometimes a lot of irrelevant information. So the mention of minimalist design in this list of principles is also a reaction to that context. But in the principle, we also have another thing, it's aesthetics. And why is that important? I would say because when something is beautiful, it also is easily memorable. And aesthetics is also linked to a brand's identity. And in the case of internal dashboards, the data that is shown is actually a mirror of real people's work. So if it's beautifully presented, it can reinforce the sense of belonging of that team. And I think that aesthetics and usability go very well together. And I think it's also the reason why Jakob Nielsen included aesthetics in a list of usability principles. So here we are, and I'll leave you with the recap of the 10 principles, and thank you very much. And I will be happy to answer your questions if you have any. Maybe I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see you again. Stop sharing.
That was fantastic.
I see we have Q&A sections. That's right. That's where I shall look. So lovely, clear if it's bad sound. It's okay. Some are not questions but reactions. And thank you very much for that. The best it's based on number of filters. Okay, she had in the container. Okay, there is a question: is there best practice on when you should hide filters based on number of filters? I would not say that there is a specific number after which you should hide them or not. But the main thing is that you should always be clear about what is the main action, the entry point of the dashboard. So, for example, let's imagine I'm developing a dashboard for salespeople who are in different countries, and every person is in charge of a country. So maybe the entry point is the button to select a country. So that one should not be hidden. That's the main thing that the person is supposed to do the first thing is supposed to do when he uses the dashboard. But all the other ones that are less priority, they could be hidden. So to avoid visual pollution, have a clear interface, but at the same time, you can open up the panel if you want to dig deeper. I'd say that. So it's a judgment call. There's no fixed number, I'd say. Okay, I'm going through the questions. If there is any that you would like me to answer, just tell me.
I think there is a question from Becker. She is asking if you use this heuristics as is, or do you have a more detailed checklist framework for critiquing specific visualization or dashboards?
No, I don't. I think of it. In fact, I think there is a lot in these heuristics, and I made a lot of efforts to keep it short, but we could talk about it for an entire day. So if you dig into each heuristic, you have a lot of things to check for in your dashboard. But it depends on your specific dashboard.
And I think there is a one question around from Mick. He has mentioned that I have a team of early career folks, and this is an area that he would love to elevate their game. Do you have any suggestions on how to help them learn these principles?
Well, my go-to resource is the website NN Group website. I'm not sure how it's written, but it should be something like I wrote it in the chat. nngroup.com maybe. NN stands for Nielsen, like Jakob Nielsen, and N like Norman, like Don Norman. So the two people I mentioned in the presentation. And there you find a lot of resources about usability in general. So it's a great point to start.
I think that's great. And also, personal suggestion, go through this session again, what I will do. So that would be really helpful.
There was maybe a last question with regards to documenting and expose the solution purpose, data sources, data scope, and so on. It is recommended to have dedicated tab. I think all these things about reassurance element and knowing the context of your dashboard, in the majority of cases, when you use the dashboard, you should not need that. It should be already clear by the title, by the different elements that you've dropped in the interface. But of course, some people may be interested in that. So I would provide maybe a small button or a hover over button in which you can just have additional information. But it's outside the main user flow, I would say, in most cases.
I think we're good. Thank you so much, Silvia. Thank you so much for your time. And we all love the session. Thank you so much for bringing this information to us.
Thank you to you.
Okay, now I'll hand over to Chimdi and share screen.
Perfect. Thanks, Prashant. So yeah, thanks, Silvia. Such an amazing talk. I really find that, when we look at dashboards, whether it's on TP or at work, sometimes you just have these ones that stand out to you and you can't really tell, like, why is this one that much more easier to relate to? And I find like a lot of these concepts which you just talked about, that really helps connect the users quicker and deeper into the work that we're doing. And even though sometimes it's hard to really think about them on the go, I think that your list there is really a good starting point, and the resources I think that you provided are super helpful. So thanks for that, because at the end of the day, when we build dashboards, really if the user isn't enjoying it, or if they're intimidated by it, they're really not going to touch it. So thanks for that, and I think we would definitely have a lot to get into after this talk as an audience. So thanks for that. Next, we have Ant Pulley. And Ant is basically a senior visualization developer at Lloyds Banking Group, and he's based in the UK. As far as his Tableau journey, he's been using Tableau for about 7 years now for both work and pleasure. You can definitely check out his TP profile, and you're going to see like a whole bunch of interesting stuff there that you can get into. He's a Tableau ambassador and a 3-time winner of the Elisa Fink WTF I Never Knew Tableau Could Do That Busy for 2022, 2023, and 2024. So like 3 years back to back. Basically, this guy has been putting out so much stuff that you're looking at it like, what is even going on here? So his technical abilities and prolificness is just really on another level. So I think we're going to be getting some amazing stuff from him today. And in addition to that, he's also received 4 Visit the Day nominations on Tableau Public, and that's definitely quite a bit. I mean, when you think about the fact that these are visualizations that are picked from all the things that are posted daily on Tableau, to get even just one is fantastic. So again, amazing stuff. Fun fact, outside of Tableau, Ant has a wife and 2 young daughters. If you go on his Twitter, you're going to see a lot of them featured there. So definitely check them out. Just amazing, amazing. He enjoys playing the saxophone. He enjoys playing tennis, and he's a black belt in Taekwondo. So, he's definitely keeping himself occupied outside of the Tableau world here. And today he's going to present us with a talk called Animation, Interactivity, and Ridiculous Ideas. So ridiculous in a positive way, obviously. And I think this is going to be a fun one. So over to you, Ant. Take it away.
Thank you very much. What an intro. Wow. Okay, let me share my screen.
I wanted to say that I will go to Ant's place and and steal the vises, but now that I know that he has a taekwondo black belt, I will not.
No, you will not. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for that intro. Yes, my name is Ant, and I am going to talk to you about ridiculous ideas along with other things. As you can see on the right there, one ridiculous idea for you. I did have an intro slide. It's sort of been covered, but I noticed the one thing that was missing was that I'm also the co-lead of the Visi winning Tableau public user group. I don't know if that was banned from saying that on this user group, but I thought I better mention that as well. And also slightly new news as of last week, I'm joining the Games Night Viz community projects. That's with Will, Lewis and Tina. So that's where we look at video games data and allowing people to try out different things with that. So that's good fun. Get involved with that. I'll show you a picture of my kids. Why not? There they are. This is not long after the Tableau conference. You can see my Tableau community hat as we sit in our garden. So yeah, there's my wife Jen, my kids Thea and Elsie looking rather happy. Elsie's a little bit ill at the moment, so that's a bit sad. She's not quite so happy today. So yeah, what am I going to talk to you about? So I'm going to talk to you about what it says really, bit of animation, bit of interaction, a lot of ridiculous ideas. And I'm going to start off just by showing you a few examples of where I've done that before, what kind of things I've done, and then I'm going to jump into Tableau for a bit and just show a few sort of tips and things that I've sort of picked up, some watch outs, that kind of thing. So I'm going to start off with animation using pages. So the pages shelf in Tableau is quite an easy, nice way to look at animation. First example here from Makeover Monday a while back is more traditional, I suppose. You're using time on the pages shelf and it's showing a change over time. So you press a button and you get to see the time. And this one was around how CEO salaries are starting to re-dwarf the average worker salary over time. So that's kind of, I also verge into the slightly less traditional. This is the second viz where I've featured the relaxing octopus that you see on the screen. It's done again using pages, but this time to have some sort of smooth animation, so you get a nice relaxing feeling as you watch the octopus breathe. Now pages is what I'd call sort of, I guess you're not interacting with that to get the animation happening. You're pressing play and it's rolling through. But a lot of the stuff around animation, you need to interact. You need to switch a filter on or use a parameter. And my preference is parameters. I like playing with parameters, doing lots of things like that. And a few examples of what we've done here. This one's a viz on the British monarchy, their lives and reigns. This is probably a bit more businessy, if you like. So it's got buttons to change the views. When you change them, you get different lengths, you can sort things, and just the animation, adding that level of animation just makes it look nice. It makes you can follow things a lot easier. And then there's some more ridiculous things. So when I 100 vises on Tableau Public, I decided to do a viz on it because why not? And this is sort of another method where I've just got one button you're pressing and it's just advancing the story. And as it advances the story, lots of things are changing on the canvas. So you're bringing things in, stuff's moving off, you bring an image in, you're doing that kind of thing. So it's very different types of uses, but I just enjoy it. They're a lot of fun. And then there's sort of pure, what I'm calling pure interactivity, where I'm sort of not worrying about the animation and it's just doing sort of interactive stuff. And the very first one I sort of had an awful lot of fun with, this is not long after I'd started in Tableau Public, was a Makeover Monday on Nintendo Switch sales. You can start to see why I'm getting involved with Games Night Viz. But this one was before dynamic zone visibility, a long way before, but it was all lots of floating containers, lots of parameters, lots of sheet swapping, lots of what can I use that button for, interactivity, just to try and make it feel like a product, not feel like a dashboard, but using that interactivity. So that was hugely enjoyable to do. And then I've got other things like this, which are a bit more on the business side, but sort of this one's on my Twitter usage. The GIF for some reason doesn't want to start at the top. I don't know why it does that, but it's perhaps more stuff you'd use in a business day to day. So you've got your buttons that switch views, and it's just that interactivity, pretty much all parameter driven, which I really enjoy. And as always, ridiculous ideas always at the forefront of my mind. And that could be anything from getting the user to flip some pancakes to see some survey results, using animation, using some tricks and hiding things so they appear at the right time. A nice Christmassy one. So I've released a few versions of this one where you can decorate your own Christmas tree, you can add tinsel, you can click and do lots of things. All parameter driven. This one's got a bit of pages in it as well. So when you put lights on it, the pages flash. So it's all good fun. Or there's this one, which is probably my most well-known one, the Mario Viz. Doc Elder gave me some Mario socks at the Tableau conference in recognition of this one. Thank you very much. But again, I love this one because it's a game. I've made a game in Tableau. I've used a lot of tricks and tips to try and make it really smooth and make it feel like sort of that great kind of experience. So there's a few examples of the kind of thing I like doing and I use animation interactivity for. So what I'm going to do now is jump into Tableau very slowly apparently, and just talk through a few different things and a few sort of watch outs and things I found. I'm going to start with, I'm going very Christmassy. It's like completely the wrong time of year for this, but it's a good thing to explain what I'm talking about. And I'm going to start with pages. So I'm a musician. I like music. I've tried a few vizzes where I've visualized music on the page where they've all been static before, but I've always had this idea of actually I want to have an animated something like a sing-along type viz. So I did this I chose a quite simple song so I could make the data quite easily. And I chose Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, why not? So the idea of this is you hit play, at the top you get your sort of the notes of the music running through, and on the bottom, should you wish, you could sing along at Tableau's own speed, because you don't get much control over the speed at which you go. So you've either got slightly too fast or quite slow or really slow. But either way, it's good fun. You can obviously create a GIF and sort of change that. But what I wanted to do here is just shout out a few things about pages that might seem a little bit counterintuitive. They're quite easy to set up. So my data source for this consists of 200 odd pages. So essentially I've got a page for every half step of a note so that I can plot my way through the song. So basically I've got an ID and each ID represents a page. So each ID represents what I want to see on the page. It's got a note placement, it's got the word associated with it, but it's pretty simple. And what I do is I put ID on pages shelf, I put it on columns because I want it to go along left to right, and I put the note placement. So it's really simple. And what I want to do is see that move along and see the history appear behind it. So in theory, you click show history, you click play, and of course you get no history, which is not what you'd expect. So this is one of those times where you bang your head against the wall and think, well, I've just clicked that. That should be doing what I expect. Why is that happening? And it's actually quite a simple fix, if not particularly intuitive, and it's just to do with animations. And if you go to animations for your sheet, you need them off for that to work. That simple. Ironic, given I'm trying to animate it and I have to turn animations off. But animations in this sense talks about marks animating as opposed to pages animation. So if you turn that off, you see I get my history. Great. So I just wanted to shout that out because it took me longer than it should have done to work that one out. So now I've got my history. It all works fine. Lovely. And what you can do with your history is change things. So you can change the format of your historic marks as well as your current mark. So I've chosen just to have my historic marks slightly more translucent, so you only ever see the color pop for the most recent one. And yeah, you also have to make sure you check all here, because otherwise you'll only get your selected month. So that's what I wanted to show there. Just sort of wanted to highlight that there's some things that aren't always super intuitive. There are some fun things you could do with it as well. What I quite like is you could turn it into a line chart by hitting trails, and that essentially makes a line chart, which then is obviously better for sort of time series analysis, that kind of thing. And if you hit play, you get a nice line chart which is extending. What I quite like, and it's in doing this presentation, it's given me a bit of an idea, is setting like last 10 points. If you then hit play, you get this kind of quite amusing. Has anyone played Snake on the Nokia 3310? It reminds me of that, and I'm thinking there must be a viz in this now. So this has already given me ideas, which is great. So there's a few fun things you could do with animation. And the other things I wanted to shout out here, so there's 2 pages on here, two worksheets which use pages, and you can synchronize them. So you can put your page control and you can click on synchronize, and that means those 2 vizzes will move at the same pace, which is quite handy. The other things I want to call out, and this is more just how it works. When you publish this to Tableau Public, there are some rendering things that change. So this particular control is what you see on Tableau Desktop. It gives you the play both backwards and forwards and stop, and it gives you a speed. When you publish that to Tableau Public, which has gone here, it looks different. So you only get the play forward and backwards, and you get the stop. You don't get any ability to change the speed, which means Rudolph becomes very much like you've had a bit too many sherries over the course of Christmas Day and you're trying to sing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer at the end of the day. It's really slow. It could be very slow. So you have to, if you are designing something for Tableau Public, with animate that kind of animation in, you have to have a think about that. And the other thing is the positioning. So you'll notice on here, if you're eagle-eyed, that's slightly off center. It's slightly to the right, and that's a bit trial and error, because when you publish to Tableau Public, it needs to be in the middle. So there was a bit of trial and error and republishing to get that fit the right way. So that's one example of pages. The other one is my original relaxing octopus, which didn't form part of that other one. This is just the flip side of the animation, where you can have a smooth animation between 2 points. And this is where you're not looking at history. You're just looking at, I want to see the transition from one page to another in a smooth animated way. And it's again, relatively simple. The main difference here is you're not showing history. I'm not going to go into detail around the points here, but there are lots of points making up this octopus. And I've essentially got 2 pages, one which has one set of points and one which has another set of points. And all I'm doing is moving between the 2 a number of times. The main thing to make the animation work is to ensure your measures are aggregated, so that Tableau knows not to treat them all individually. So when I hit play, it will navigate through the pages. What you'll see down here is I've got more than 2 pages. There's actually only 2 pages worth of data. The reason I put more in is because on Tableau Public, you can't loop the animation. On Tableau Desktop, you can. You get this little loop option down here. On Tableau Public, it will only play through once. And I wanted my octopus to have more longevity on Tableau Public, so I gave him 8 pages worth to play with there. So that's some pages, a bit of animation around pages. They're quite easy to use. There's just a few weird nuances around when animation will and won't work. The next thing I wanted to jump into was lightsabers. Lightsabers. Told you it was ridiculous ideas. So this is a viz I did a little while ago, looking at the primary users of different colored lightsabers, something everyone wants to know. And the idea is you click on a lightsaber hilt and you get a lightsaber. Woohoo! No sound, sadly. I'd love sound bites to be included. That would be excellent. But as I put at the end, add your own sound effects. That's great. And it's quite simple, but it's quite a good intro to sort of how I like to do animation, which is essentially moving marks on a page just to try and get them from one point to another, and what's the best way to do it. So I'm going to go through it briefly with my sheet entitled One Saber, because I'm just looking at one lightsaber, obviously. So it's all driven by a parameter called p-character, and that's just a string which allows anything in it. It's just a clear string. So if I were to type Darth Vader, then I get what looks like a lightsaber. Brilliant, simple. So first thing I want to show, and it's something I use all the time with animation, and that is fixing axes. So if I go here, you'll see that I've fixed my axis at a certain point and a certain end. And the reason for that is because I want to bring the marks onto the view. I don't want anything to be visible first of all. I want them to appear on the view once I've changed something. So if I change that to automatic, you'll see what it actually looks like. And it's basically just a line. All this is a line chart with 2 points. So that's how those sabers are made up. You've got point 1, point 2. So if I show you the data behind this viz is 12 rows, 2 rows for each character. So there's Mr. Darth Vader at the bottom. You've got a start point and an end point. Your start point starts at 0, 0, and your end point is at 0, 1. So that's all the data is, and all I'm doing in this viz is saying I want that endpoint to be either 1 or 0, depending on whether that lightsaber is switched on. And that's done through this parameter. And so what I haven't mentioned is I'm also using map players here. I'm not going to go into super detail with map players, but if you haven't used it before, it is very useful. It is a bit hacky. It's using a functionality around maps, actual maps in Tableau, and sort of hacking it to be able to have more than one layer on a chart, so you're not restricted to just dual axes. But you can look up, there's loads of good blogs about how that works. But essentially, when I'm updating that parameter with Darth Vader, whatever it happens to be, I've got an update X calculation, which looks at that parameter and says, okay, am I going to put a 0 or 1 for my end value? So all that's doing is saying, look at the type of point it is, and type is either start or end. So I've got 2 points for each character. If it's the end point, and if that parameter contains the character you're looking at, then put X, and X in the data would be 1. Otherwise, put 0. So if it's not in the parameter, put it at 0. And what that means is when it's not there, it shrinks down to 2 points, but both at 0, 0. And when it is there, obviously it's the full lightsaber effect. I hope that made sense. So what I'm going to do is just move this back, because I don't like the line. I want it to look good. So the other thing I've done here to get the actual lightsaber effect, and the reason I've used map layers, is so I can get that kind of fun neon sort of lightsaber effect. And that was really simple to do. It's basically the same thing 4 times. I've just got thinner lines each time and brighter colors each time. So if I add my next layer on, you'll see I've just got the same line again. It's just a thinner line with a brighter red. And if I put the next layer on, again, thinner line, brighter red. And then the final layer is sort of almost a white color, that white color that goes through the middle. And I could have gone further. I could have made it really smooth gradient, but I thought that was cool enough for what I wanted. So that's sort of how a saber is built. What I also wanted to just go over was how I use that parameter in conjunction with 6. So I'm using that same parameter to turn on and off any of the 6 lightsabers independently. And that's done with a technique. I'm going to call it parameter as a data source, but that's completely stealing from what Mark Reed told me when I learned it off him many years ago. So call out to Mark Reed, because I've learned most of this from him. But basically, what I'm doing, every time I click on one of these, I'm adding something to the parameter. So I've put the parameter here. When I click Darth Vader gets added to the parameter. When I click Rey Skywalker, she just gets added to the end of the parameter. When I click Ahsoka, can't even pronounce it, it just adds it to the end. And then what happens is that contains function that I used can find any of them. So it's all one string. So it's just looking for that character within that one string. And then to turn them off, I've just got a calculation that looks to see if it can find that character in the string. If it's there, it replaces it with blank. And if it's not there, it adds it onto the end. So if I look at that calculation, again, it's quite a simple calculation. Once you get your head around how it works, you can use this in lots of different ways. It's really useful for multi-selects, for doing lots of different interactivity things on any kind of dashboard. But what it's doing is it's saying, okay, if your character is within the parameter already, so your lightsaber is on, then replace it with a blank. So take it out of the parameter. If it's not in the parameter already, then add it to the parameter. And that essentially gets sent through to the parameter. I've said parameter a lot of times, sent that through to the parameter, and that sort of updates the viz. So that's how that works. And it's a really cool it's something I use all the time now, this parameter as a data source, and it's really useful in lots of different things. So that's that's what I wanted to talk about there. The next one, I'm just checking, doing a time check. Yep. Next one, Tableau Souls. So I don't know if anyone's played any of the Souls-like games like Elden Ring, Demon Souls, anything like that. They're sort of notoriously hard computer games. I use that as a reason to build a viz. And it wasn't really anything to do with the game. The idea was to have a menu system that allowed the user to change what your character looks like. And I wanted like a carousel, an animated carousel, so that sort of I'll show you how it works rather than talk it through. Makes more sense. So Tableau Souls, and I'll explain why I'm doing it on Tableau Public once it opens on me. So the idea, you can choose a warrior, you can choose a mage, or you can choose an archer. And once you've chosen them, you can choose what clothes they're wearing, because that's what you do in RPGs. You spend the first 3 hours of the game deciding what they look like. But the idea is you click on the button, you get this really cool, smooth sort of carousel effect that goes across. It's not really related to what I'm talking about, but the idea behind this, you click start, and then it's, oh, there's your first enemy, attack him. And then you attack him, I think. You attack him very slowly, and then you die, because in the Souls games, that's all that happens. You win a battle. So that's the viz. That it's not actually a game. It just ends there. But the point of what I'm going to explain is that actually this is my desktop version of the viz. If I start trying to click things here, there's no animation. It's gone for no apparent reason. And this is more of a watch out than anything. Animation, you can get to a point with animation in Tableau when it starts to stop working, and it's often not for any specific reason. There's some things you can pin it down to, and there's some things where there's sort of some sort of internal rating system, I guess, that Tableau has that sort of stops the animation happening. Usually it's if it's too complex, you've got too many marks, or you've got too many calculations going on. Probably in terms of this one, if you use custom shapes in your mark type, it can, if you use big ones or complex ones, it can break very quickly. So if you see things which you're expecting to animate stop animate, often it's because of something like the images being too big, or you're too complex, or publish it on Tableau Public. You might find it's just your computer that's rubbish, and Tableau Public can manage it better, which is quite possibly the case with mine, because I've got a very old computer. So that I was just using that one to sort of show that kind of example. And the last one I wanted to speak about quickly, excuse me, and this one, again, this was a diversity in data set a few years ago, so another community initiative. And what this one is it was Black History Month, and it was about scientific achievements and inventions. And the idea is you've got a list of decades down here, and you've got a load of people, and you can click on them, and you get this cool animated effect of that particular icon moving up to the top, and you get some changes and stuff going on down here. And the reason I want to share this one, there's a couple of bits to it. One is a little trick I've got over here, where I've created them to set default parameters, because what can happen when you're building something like this, you're changing parameters all the time. You want to set it to a default position so that you can publish it with your set parameters. And it could be a bit of a pain to go and find the parameter, change it to what you want. So what I do is I keep something off the side of the canvas, which you can click on, and it will just set your parameter to default. And the beauty of it, because it's off the canvas, because it's not there when you publish it, it doesn't get seen at all in Tableau Public on server or whatever it is. So that's quite a handy trick. The only thing to note is, in order to get it over there, you sort of have to fudge it over. So you can sort of drag the right and drag the left, and it will put it over there. Because if you try and do that just by dragging, it disappears, which you don't want to do. But that's quite a useful little tip for you. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the fact I'm using something called a transparent overlay in order to keep my animations working. So you see I've got a load of icons here. I've got actually two sheets. I've got an icon sheet, which I will go to, which has my icons in it, which is great. And this will work when I click on it, because I've set it up to work. Oops, not quite set it up to work. Hold on. Worksheet, actions. Where's it gone? So I click on it and the animation will work, and that's fine. But what happens when I click on it is you get your mark stays selected. That's the default Tableau approach. When you click on something, it will stay selected, which is absolutely fine. But for this, it doesn't really work for me because I don't want it selected. I want the user not to have to click off it to get the full view. I want it to look all nice and smooth. And the trick I usually do to get rid of that deselect is the true false trick. I don't know where it originated from, but that's where you have a true calculation, which is just a Boolean argument true, and a false calculation, which is the opposite. You can drop the true onto detail, and then there's this little trick where you go to worksheet actions. You go to this sheet, you can add a filter, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, for this icon sheet, when I select it, clearing the selection will show all values, and I want to set true equal to false. Now, true doesn't ever equal false, and that's the point. So you're setting an action which will automatically filter out everything on the dashboard. And when everything's off the dashboard, then this rule means it will then show all the values. So it's essentially very quickly, without anyone noticing, is resetting the view so you don't get that selection mark. So let's check if that worked. So if I click on one of these, click on it, now it has worked. See, I've clicked on it, it's now up here and there's no selection mark. However, it doesn't animate anymore, which is obviously painful for me because I like things animating. The reason that's happened is because when you do filter things and when you clear stuff out, it sort of breaks the animation, it stops the animation working. And for that reason, that's why I've moved to using a transparent overlay to control the viz underneath, because I find that works really well. So I've actually got this interact view, which is exactly the same as the one underneath. I've just made it transparent. So I've just dragged the color down to 0. It's the same view. It just means I can put all my calculations in it. I can put all my control mechanisms in it, and it will work exactly how I like. So I just click on it, and then I'm back to animating. So that one, and I think I've just about got through that in the time I wanted to. So back to my presentation and finish off with a bit more chat on ridiculous ideas, because people ask me where I get my ideas from, and in all honesty, I don't know. They come out of somewhere. They come out of conversations. They come out of things I've seen, things I've heard. But this is my current list. In fact, my current list is slightly longer because I've got one on gremlins that's just gone to the bottom. But I've got a big long list with not many ticks against it of all the weird sort of ideas I've come up with. They could be ideas for a specific chart, a particular type of animation, whatever it might be. Some examples that have been on there for ages: seesaw, I don't know what that means. Animated dancing stick man, that's got to be a good one. Words that should be used more, I've literally no idea. Very strange ideas that end up coming on there, but some of them do come off. So Mr. Tickle, this was one of the ones that was on my list, and one that went down pretty well. It works quite similar to that lightsabers dashboard. Actually, it's essentially 2 lines, one on top of the other, driven by a parameter. Eyes following mouse. So this one sort of worked. The idea here was I just wanted something silly where I could move my mouse around the screen and the eyes would follow it, and that's what this is. It didn't work as smoothly as I would have liked. Obviously, there's a lot more processing required with the strings, etc., but it sort of worked. And then I've got some that didn't really work. Karma Chameleon. If anyone knows the Culture Club song, Karma Chameleon, I wanted just to do he comes and goes, and that's literally the viz. But on Tableau Public, it just doesn't work at all. But I've left it on there because you learn from these things. But sometimes they really do work. And actually, my latest viz of the day, just a couple of months ago, was a culmination of 2 ridiculous ideas, I guess. One was magnifying glass, fairly loose, and the other one was consult ant on ants. Consult ant being my X handle, and obviously my name's Ant, and that culminated in this viz, which ended up surprisingly to me, I guess, as a viz of the day, because the sort of ridiculous vizzes don't often manage to get there, but it uses a lot of techniques I've used before. It's got a lot of layering, it's got a lot of cheating going on behind, but it uses all those sort of same things, transparent overlays, all that kind of stuff. So very pleased to have got that as a visit a day. So it does work. They do work sometimes. And with that note, I think I've come to the end, hopefully in a good amount of time. So if anyone's got any questions either now or you've got all my information here, feel free to drop me a line afterwards.
Wow, that was just amazing, Hans. Thank you so much. Like, the comment section was just going crazy because, as you know, this ridiculousness is just beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's see. Do we have any Q&A that needs to be addressed? Let's see.
A bit nervous about that.
Okay, so there's one from Faith that says, Hans, have you considered doing animation outside of Tableau, for example, through D3.js, or have you found Tableau mostly sufficient for what you're looking to do?
It's a good question. I've not done anything outside of Tableau in it. I have loosely considered looking at other stuff, but I would say I've managed to get most of what I wanted done in here. But it is a good shout, because I know you get, if you really want to go to town on animation, you probably want, like I say, it does hit a limit when it breaks in Tableau, and it's like that, because it's not, it's a useful thing to have occasionally in the data viz world. It's not usually you're not using it, so it's, yeah, I think I would consider it if there was a particularly good idea I wanted to get working.
Awesome. We look forward to seeing if you ever get into that. Hopefully you share with us. Another one from Faith, I guess, is what's the difference between marks animating and pages animating? So prompted by turning off animations when you set up pages.
Yeah, so mark animation, you're talking about just moving a specific mark on a sheet around the sheet, depending on, the filters might change, so the number will change, so it animates, or the parameter might change what's happening with that. The way the animation works with marks is very much tied to your discrete pills, so you can only animate a mark if, say, all the discrete pills are the same for that mark, which is why it sometimes breaks when you have parameter actions driving the background which change. So it's that's sort of how the mark stuff works. The animation in the pages one, they do butt against each other sometimes, which is why you have to turn them off. What I didn't show on the octopus one is, although you can get them both working together, if you change the animation speed to a lot quicker than the page is moving, then you get the octopus sort of go, and then it waits for 3 seconds and it goes, so it's quite hard to get them perfectly lined up. So it's I'm not sure that answers the question, but it's they're quite different, and they can work together, but it's a bit tricky to get them working together.
Nice. Thank you. Okay, maybe we can do one or two more, and then we go into our last but not least. So let's see. I guess this one is more of another curious question. What is the most useful animation you've created for Lloyd's Banking Group? And this is from Felipe. I hope I said that correctly.
That's a good question. So probably the most useful one I did was around some network chart stuff we did. We were building sort of a story of how a project went, and just sort of talking the stakeholder through the data science models that were being used, and it was all around networks. And actually it worked really well for that, because you could sort of bring stuff into the network as part of an animation. You could change the sizes of things as the story went along. So I think that's probably one of the most useful ones I had. It was quite a specific case. It wasn't a dashboard as such, it was a storytelling device, but that was where it came in quite well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. And I guess that does kind of answer another question here from Dennis, where he was wondering if any of these techniques lend towards your work-related visualizations. I'm guessing the answer might be yes, possibly.
It's yes, if you look below the surface of, you know, wiggly octopus arms and Mr. Tickle arms and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, because a lot of the stuff around just the interactivity, just like I've mentioned, if you're using parameters to multi-select things, if you're particularly with dynamic zone visibility now, just understanding the logic, being able to work the logic through of how a user will click things and how it all works together. So yeah, Mr. Tickle did end up on our work server for a little while, but it was more a sort of, that was when animations came in and we were just sort of playing around with it. But yeah, there's lots to learn, and lots to learn when building these kind of gamey, fun type visits. You will find stuff that helps, even if it's small tips to bigger things. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, that sounds good. So I guess if you have any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and Ant, if you don't mind, maybe you can go in there and engage. And of course, if you want to connect later, his information is there. You can grab it on the slides and in the video. So please do so. And now we're going to move on to final talk, which is going to be a collaboration between two amazing people. So Prasan, do you mind getting us their fantastic credentials? Perfect. So first here we have Pierre. Tom has a talent for taking large data sets and presenting trends that tell a visual story. He is currently focused on intake and outcome data for public and private visualizations at Shelter Animals Count. In terms of his Tableau journey, he's created a public industry trending dashboard which shares insights into the shelter overpopulation crisis. And he's also tapped the power of Tableau forecasting feature, which now provides shelters a tool to sort of predict what can happen in the future, which I think is extremely powerful with respect to, you know, planning and strategy for these little businesses and companies all over the place. Outside of work, Tom volunteers at a local humane society, which again, given what he does, that's definitely not the surprising thing. He loves animals and everything. Is an avid cyclist, nature, pet, and landscape photographer, and he also loves hiking. And today he's going to be giving us a joint talk about using Tableau to help hopeless animals. And the second person who's going to be collaborating on that talk is Samantha Hill. In terms of what she does with Tableau, Samantha Hill, MNO. I'm not sure what that stands for. Do you mind just quickly sharing what that stands for? I guess you can explain what that stands for after when you get into it. So Samantha Hill, MNO, she joined Shelter Animals Count in 2022 as the Director of Data and Technology. And she's a lifelong animal advocate and has been passionate about utilizing data to create a positive impact in the lives of homeless pets. So definitely some impactful work going on there. Like we definitely know like there's a lot of animals that are, you know, going through a lot of things that could really get some rescuing and help, you know, to help improve the quality of their lives. In terms of her Tableau journey, driven by her passion for ethical, data-driven decision-making, Samantha's primary goal is to ensure that reporting, dashboards, and research conducted at Shelter's Animal Count uphold the highest standards of quality with the ultimate aim of benefiting a wide range of audiences committed to improving the lives of animals. So, I mean, this is going to be very interesting to hear. A fun fact about Samantha, she lives in the northeast of Ohio. She loves spending time with her husband, dogs, and cats. So we've got some very strong animal lovers here. And I think it's going to be amazing to see how, you know, they're sharing their love for animals with Tableau. And of course, just a reminder, the presentation is called Using Tableau to Help Hopeless Animals. So I'm going to pass it over. And so please lead us away.
Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be talking about how we are using Tableau and to help inform analytics for organizations across the United States and just recently expanded to Canada. So I'm going to just start with a little bit of an intro, and then Tom is going to take you into some of our visualizations specifically. So thanks so much also for that introduction. just to add on to that, I essentially would never have described myself as a data person until really pretty recently, about 5 years ago. I would have said I was a reader, a writer, an animal lover, but data was not really part of that. And then about 10 years ago, I was working in a Child Studies Research Center, and I was working towards my Master's of Nonprofit Organization, where I learned that the power of data to show impact was just vital. And that was something that I really wanted to be a part of. And the animal welfare industry was the industry that I focused on. It wasn't an industry that was very accessible when it came to data and research. And so that was the area that I decided to go into. Now at Shelter Animals Count, I do oversee all of our data collection, analytics, and research, and then all of the technology that we build behind that to support those different aspects. And of course, my four-legged companions here at my own home help keep me grounded with a lot of the work that I'm doing. Tom, would you like to?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. I'm in Colorado, and I've been in animal welfare for probably 25 plus years in some form or another, whether that was walking dogs, playing with cats, working in a clinic. In fact, after this presentation, I'm going to be in surgery this afternoon with the clinic. So it's always a fun time in there. But now I get the privilege to work with Shelter Animals Count. And what we're doing is taking the data that they collect, and Samantha's going to talk about this a little bit, and we're going to plot it into using Tableau, plot it in there, and share a story. And I'm actually going to share a story with you with the two visualizations that we're going to show in a little bit. So.
Yeah, so I'll just start by sharing a little bit about Shelter Animals Count. For those of you that may not be familiar, we were established in 2012 after national animal welfare organizations across the United States came together, and they wanted to compile a complete picture of animals entering and leaving organizations across the country. We were established as a neutral, independent nonprofit organization. So we are governed by a board of directors that includes a lot of national animal welfare organizations, as well as representatives of shelters and rescues across the United States. We have a small staff team, very small staff team for our small organization, but we're really fortunate to have great support from volunteers who help us with projects, as well as committee members who are helping us see the boots on the ground, what's going on, and adding context. We have over 7,000 organizations registered with us and have counted over 26 million animals over the span of our data collection period since 2016. So why shelter data? People in animal welfare and really the nonprofit space in general are very mission driven. Our goal is to have positive impact on animals in our care as well as our communities. And data is really the best way to make sure that we're actually having the impact that we're looking for. So day in and day out, or individuals who are working in kennels and are helping to assist with behavior challenges, sometimes it's tough for them to see the progress that's being made. So when you have data that's connected to goals and a mission, that helps to provide a way for whole teams to really celebrate their successes. And one of the things that drives us as an organization is that we know that data shouldn't be driven by the stories you want to tell, but that data should be the one that's driving the stories. So when there's a narrative that comes up, we know that it's possible to have one or two data points that fit that narrative, but it may not be actually telling the whole story or be telling an accurate story. So since data is so powerful, as we all know here, we believe that starting with that narrative idea helps to get us into what data points we really want to start looking at. And then we have to have a holistic approach. We need to be willing to change our story based on all the data and all the context that it provides. So at SAC, we work to empower animal welfare organizations to share their stories by using that holistic data approach instead of just having a narrative based on one or two data points. The types of data we collect at SAC that inform all of our dashboards we collect intake and outcome data at the shelter level. So organizations submit this to us monthly. It comes in by species and age, giving us a lot of different filtering that we can do. That monthly data is really important for animal welfare as it allows us for real-time insights and shows seasonality through the year. Nationally, we can use that monthly data to understand if there's difference regionally or in different org types. We also collect data for more than just cats and dogs, which we started in 2021. So we collect it on equine, farm animals, rabbits, etc. We also collect data points on our community services that are being provided. Shelters and rescues are not just providing services to the animals in their care, they're also providing services to animals in their communities. So we now have a database that allows us to collect that information to show a more holistic picture of what organizations are doing. Aggregate shelter level data, that intake outcome and the community services data has been really important, and it's been very valuable and continues to be very valuable. We also have just started collecting animal level data, which will get us the specific information on each animal as they move throughout the system. So we'll be able to collect and see how an animal that enters, how they leave, determine trends on all of that information as well. A point just to Silvia's comment earlier about standardization, which really hit home for me. Animal level data is one of those areas that's not standardized as much right now. And so organizations are just putting in data the way that most benefits them. And so our organization actually works to help with standardizing some of that data entry practices so that when we aggregate it at a national level, we know that we're speaking the same language and we're using those same terms and we know what those terms mean. So our audience for this data is varied. We play a lot of roles inside and outside of our industry. First and foremost, our audience is our shelters and rescues that participate. We want them to have access to their data and understand their data in ways that will help them move forward with their programs. Our data set does include all types of organizations. So it can be a brick and mortar organization that has a building, has government contracts, or it could be a foster-based organization that doesn't have a building and they just rely on their community to take in animals. All of them are very much a part of the ecosystem, and so we try to support them all equally, but they all have different needs. National organizations and funders are also one of our main constituents, and they use our data to show grant impacts and understand where there might be more support needed in the future. Our data is also looked at by media and research regularly so that the public can actually see what's going on in the industry as well. And some of the things that we offer is we do have static reports on top of the dynamic dashboards that we'll be going into. Our static reports help us to kind of cater to some of the audiences that may struggle a little bit with diving into the dashboards and seeing the nitty gritty of the data. So we work to have those as more highlights. And one of the key things that we implement here at our organization is that we remain neutral. So any commentary that is on our data, it steers clear of the good, bad. It remains very neutral as much as possible. So now, why Tableau? Well, as I just said, we have tons of audiences, right, that are looking at this data. And we really needed a tool that could be versatile and allow us to share out this data in simple and visually appealing ways. Simply put, Tableau helped fit that bill. Tableau has a lot of capabilities that we've been using, and even more that I'm learning about even just from this call today. As a small and remote-based organization, we don't have the capacity necessarily to have a server. And so we find a lot of value in the fact that we have Tableau Public that allows us to publish these visualizations and maintain them in a public format. Data security is also a big concern for us. And so we have a lot of value in the fact that Tableau allows us to keep our data contained so that individual organization level data cannot be accessed or used to weaponize against organizations that submit their data to us. We also use Tableau for our reporting. It's a lot easier to have all of that information set up and calculations and parameters and be able to pull the data quickly for all of our reports rather than having to do a bunch of calculations every time we have a report coming out. And so with that, I am going to pass it over to Tom, who's going to show some examples of how we're using dashboards. And Tom, you're on mute, just so you know.
All right, are we better? Can we see a visualization up there?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Samantha. So let's get talking about how we're using shelter data and showing it in the United States. What I'm going to show to you today are two types of visualizations. One is an industry trend version, and this one's available also on our website, which later on, I think there's a QR code that'll take you to Shelter Animals Count. The one on the website is going to look slightly different than what they're showing up here. And that's because as we learn new things and we're getting new data points, we make those modifications so that the shelters and the public have the most recent information. But I wanted to show you this version because it compares a national metrics to a region or a state metrics. The second version I'm going to show you, and we get into the story part of it, is an actual shelter level version. Now, if you are a participating shelter with the Shelter Animals Count, you'll see this version in the portal. If you're not, or you know that you work with a shelter that wants to participate, have them reach out to us because we would love to get them involved with submitting data for the national data set. So with that, I'm going to get started here on this national trends version. This is the version that's updated through December of 23. And we have up top a couple things. And it was kind of funny when I saw Silva's presentation because some of this follows a lot of what she just said, which was really smart and made me smile. But we do have just a general setup for filters now. We have the area where you can select a region or a state. We have the org type. The org types in this case are shelters or rescues, and then government animal services. And I'm going to show you how that works in a second. And then if you wanted to drill down further, you can go into species. And we're going to do that as part of that story. We're using an information hover to explain some of the calculations and what's included in each of the categories. There's also a filtering area there. So when we select an org or a species, those filters update accordingly. The thing I also want to point out there is that shelters reporting piece. At this point, before we applied anything, there's a little over 1,300 shelters that fit that criteria. To fit this criteria, and this is part of the trending we're going to show, you had to be a shelter that reported 3 consecutive years, all months within those years. If you didn't, then it's really comparing an apples to an oranges situation. So we're keeping it consistent with the shelters that reported the 3 years, all months. We're using a band situation here. The big bands numbers up top. Both of them say national at this point, and that's because I'm going to show you what happens when we select a region. I do want to just give you a quick overview, though, of what the population balance is. The population balance for our work is outcomes divided by intakes. So if it's 100% or more, that means more animals are leaving the shelter with an outcome. If it's under that, that means more animals are sitting in the shelters for a longer period of time. And as you can see at the national level, about 1% of the animals are still sitting in the shelters as of this data set. If you hover over a state, you can see the regional intakes and outcomes and the state intakes and outcomes, depending on how you want to compare things. But we're going to get started here. And since I'm in Colorado, I'm going to select the mountain region. And what happens is the map updates with that region's states and how we're including everything. So it's consistent across the board. If you select a state, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, those all update accordingly. But what you also notice is the right side now is comparing the mountain metrics to the national metrics. And as you can see in the mountain metrics, we have a little more work to do because animals are sitting in the shelters for a longer period of time. Now, because I'm a curious kind of person, I'm going to actually select an organization type. If you're familiar with organization types within the United States, government animal services are typically the municipal shelters run by the county, usually given funding from a county source. So I'm going to apply that. And that is going to apply both to the bands and the filters and everything. But what we see right away is within those county shelters, more animals are sitting in the shelters longer without an outcome. And we're worse yet in the mountain region. So we got even more work to do. We're going to not select a species at this point because that's going to be part of our story as we get going through this. We're going to flip this over using a navigation button to the trending piece of it. Now, if you remember, I just said there's about 1,300 shelters initially. As we applied those filters, that dropped down to 33. So 33 shelters within the mountain region have reported 3 consecutive years, all months across the board. We break that population balance calculation by the month so that shelters can pretty much see like where they're getting more intakes versus outcomes. One thing I'll point out is it seems like December on all 3 years, more animals are leaving the shelter. Could be due to the holiday season. We don't really know that, but it's a good assessment. Below that, we have the bars. It's a stacked bar on its side. And we break that out by the outcomes, the live and the non-live outcomes. And as you saw at the very first part when we flip this over, there's a 6% gap of animals sitting in the shelters longer. And our adoption rates have gone down. Now we're just going to get into this story here, and we're going to go into our intakes piece of it. I'm going to keep those 2 mountain filters, government animal services. And what I want to show you in this is we have total intakes, community intakes, and then a breakout of other categories. Now, this was a piece that we wanted to give the end user a little bit more of an experience. Instead of just picking a filter, we wanted to allow them to pop a button. And so we had to figure out, because each of those intake categories, and it'll say same on the outcome side of it, is a measure. So we're using a parameter measure or parameter with multiple measures. And we had to figure out how to do that. And so a lot of Googling, a lot of community support through Tableau Public's community. And we said, hey, found this tutorial, which is in the link I think Annabelle shared. It's by, and I hope I don't botch your name too bad, Yvette Koves. She is a Tableau ambassador something. And she put out this tutorial that allows you to link your data set when you have multiple measures using a parameter and then use a parameter action. And that's what we did. So now we can select the stray. And when this updates, we're starting to see what's happening. We're starting to see increases in strays. And we're showing changes from this month to the previous year's month. We're also comparing this across the 3 years. So you can see strays compared to 22 or 21 increased. Now let's jump into that story, because if you're familiar with what I'm going to tell you next, It'll be fun to see. I'm going to apply the species cat. Now, cat is going to include both cats and kittens. And many times what we're seeing is a thing called kitten season. If you've ever heard of kitten season. Kitten season usually starts in the beginning of the year, like springtime. And that's what this data is showing you, is that March, April, and May of every year, they start seeing an increase in strays coming into the shelters of cats and kittens. Keep that in mind now as we go across to the outcomes. Because when a kitten arrives to the shelter, they have to go through spay and neuter, any of the surgeries to make sure they're okay. We make sure they don't have any sniffles or anything like that. And if they do, they get treated. And then they're ready for the adoption floor. Now, same thing as the intake, the outcome categories of adoptions, return to field, return to owner is also set up using that parameter action, multiple measures. And we're going to select adoptions. And let's see what happens with the cats. Now, I already told you, beginning of the year, the intakes for kittens and cats increase. Now, let's look at the adoptions. These are the cats and kittens that have gone through that thing, the shelter, spay, neuter, shots, and everything. And now they're on the adoption floor. So our adoptions are increasing. One thing that this also does tell you is in the fall, the adoptions are up again. There's a reason behind that. Many of the shelters that have cats and kittens and puppies and dogs, they start holding their fundraising events in spring to get the kittens money, but in fall to get a lot of the animals out of the shelters. They know this is coming, so they plan for it. And that's what you're seeing on this data here, is that the shelters across this mountain region are having more adoption events. Now, we're going to flip to a version that is in the portal. But before I go there, this version is up on Tableau Public. Annabelle put a link out there. You can download it and see how we did the parameter action based on the measures, or anything else if you want to play with it. You can also go to Shelter Animals Count and see other visualizations that we're doing. But while I flipped over, now we're going to be looking at an individual shelter. The one thing I'm going to point out right up front is the shelter name is masked. And we do that for a specific reason. We want to protect, obviously, the shelter and the data, but we still wanted to demonstrate what's going on with this shelter. We have this visualization set up so they can select either individual locations or they can aggregate it based on all the locations. Now, that's critical to them. If they're a multi-location like this one, they can see when their busy times are versus not, and then they can plan accordingly. They can also select a species and a year. We're going to do that in a second. And the reason I'm showing you this piece here, this org ID, is when we created this visualization, it has all the shelters in it. But we're using Tableau Public. And so we take that embed code and we put it into our portal, and we have it coded so when you log in as your shelter, it automatically filters to your specific shelter. So your name would pull up and all your data. It's kind of a slick move behind the scenes happening. We're also using that information hover here, which explains the calculations and what's included versus not included. But we're also, I want to point out this forecast model because this is new for the shelters. We figured out it was an out-of-the-box Tableau functionality where you could forecast data, and it changes based on the filters. So you have to have 24 months of data in there, and then Tableau predicts what's going to happen outside, like in the future. You can set that up for a month.
Excuse me, Tom, we don't see the forecast. We still see like the dashboard public outcome summary.
You see, do you see?
I
Oh,
see mountain adoption.
let me share again. Hang on.
It's okay.
I must have lost that one.
It's okay. I can cut it on the recording.
Do you see
Yes.
that now?
Yes, please.
All right. My fault.
No, not worry.
So up here, let me just real quick. This is the shelter name that was masked. I was telling you about. This org ID is what I was talking about that's used behind the scenes with the embed code. And then we gave them the functionality to select either location or aggregate. They can select species or year. Where I was talking about the forecast model is in the hover here. And on the hover, you had to have 24 months of data for Tableau's built-in feature to work. And so we applied that down. And now when we select some filters, and I'll show you that in a second, that updates accordingly. For this particular shelter, we've broken this population balance out now by month, again, so that they can see like where their busy times are versus their slower times for animals coming in. That allows them to start planning. They're also compared to the national and the region, which is the mountain region. This shelter is out of Colorado, of course. And then this is our functionality for the forecast where it shows the line. Now the line is kind of dipping here because of the trends that we're seeing across. If this data was refreshed through today, that line would be going up. I'm going to flip this over to intake, and we're going to get back to that story because if you remember, I was talking about cats. So I'm going to keep this as a stray again, and I'm going to select the cat and apply that filter. Now, at the national level, we just showed March, April, and May is when we saw the cats starting to come into the shelter. We're also using in this is the Viz and tooltip functionality, which gives them the ability to kind of hover over and say, well, where are my strays coming in as far as percent? And you can start seeing that pretty easily. Now, this forecast feature here, again, this data is only updated through February of 24 is forecasted out. But what's happening is you can see that the cats are starting to come in just like this. Same thing from the year before. Now, the next piece I'm going to tell you with this story is keep this in mind, and this has been said sometimes in other Tableau areas, is a picture's worth 1,000 words. And why that's critical is when we start flipping over to the outcomes, and I've got it set to adoptions and cats right now, the adoptions, just like at this shelter, just like at the national level, have increased in June and July. And then I know this shelter in particular, they start having events in the fall, just like the national level, and you start seeing that increase. Again, with the forecast filter here, if we had this data out further, you would see this line starting to increase as we're getting through this year. Now, that back to that picture's worth 1,000 words. Up until this point, until Shelter Animals Count said, hey, let's try this forecasting thing. Shelters knew they had kitten season coming. They knew they have puppies. They knew all of this stuff, but they never really had a way or a tool to put it out here as a visualization to say, now we can see it. And why that's important is now they can print this off, they can put it on their website, and they can go to their legislatures. They can go to their donors. They can go to anybody that they need to and say, look, instead of us just telling you we're busy, we can show you we're busy. We can show you what our trends are. And I can tell you from a different shelter that we did some work with, we plotted out their data and we took it to their county legislature. We presented it. And the first response was, I didn't know you were that busy, which that was an opportunity for that director to say, hey, we need some more, more money. We need more resources. The outcome of that meeting was 2 full-time positions given to that shelter in the next budget. Picture is worth 1,000 words. Now, I know that this is really quick. We did put up links for this, and I want to say thank you to everybody to take a look at this. Of course, if you ever want a puppy or a dog, let us know. We can help you out there too. But there's a lot going on with Shelter Animals Count that I'm going to turn it back over to Samantha so she can close us up and take us home. Thank you.
So thanks, Tom, for showing those visualizations. And, as he walked through, there's a lot of benefit that we're giving to organizations with these dashboards. We're really excited because we've essentially shifted to be able to support those individual organizations to understand and present their data to their communities and tell those stories that we were just walking through. The forecasting analytics is something that we're really hoping to expand upon, and we're excited to see that organizations can help plan ahead and help support some of those forward-thinking decisions and event planning. I dropped a link in the chat so that you could see our dashboard specifically, but here's a QR code if you would rather grab a QR code to go see the dashboards that we currently have on our public-facing website. And then we just really appreciate your time and appreciate all of the support that we get from the Tableau community. If you want to follow us, be sure to check us out on LinkedIn and stay up to date.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tom and Samantha. This is like such impactful work that's being done. So I guess we're all really appreciative of you coming here to share this with us. And of course, I think someone already touched on that, but that dashboard that you shared was like fantastically well done. And so, I can tell, and it's obvious to us that I think these are things that are having great impact. So thanks for that. In terms of Q&A, let's see if we have. And we do have. Okay. So I guess this is more of a, let me see. Did I miss something? Okay.
I think I already got the one question actually in there.
Yeah, it looks like it. So thank you for that.
I wasn't sure about time, so I wanted to respond.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to pass it back to Prasan to take us home again. Thanks to all the speakers for such amazing content. And for those of you who would want to go back and check it out again, expect the video to go soon. So, Prasan, over to you.
Thank you, Chimdi. Just going through. Okay, first and foremost, thank you to all our speakers and our audience for being here, sharing on the knowledge. We started from the heuristics and the design usability to some of the ridiculous ideas and amazing things that we can do with Tableau. And at the end, this was really good, like how we can leverage the power of analytics and Tableau to bring insights and help in a certain area and perspective. And me too, like being a parent of 5 cats, I really loved how Animal Shelters Count is helping all throughout. So thank you so much for bringing this story to us. And thank you, Tableau, for giving us this platform so that we can share all the story. And so I hope you had a great time for the Western side. Hope you have a great evening for the Eastern side. Good night to all of you and see you next month. Please register for the next Tableau user group that is coming next month. And you can scan the QR code. And let's celebrate the power of visual analytics and be there and learn and share more stories and knowledge. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here with us. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.